Bam, we're going. So, guys, let's give some context to what we're doing here because obviously the title might have caught your attention. Rob might have shared this. I might have shared this. Might have just seen it and be like, let's check out what's going on here. I think there's a lot of really valuable pieces we're going to touch on, Rob, that I'm curious to even hear your thoughts on, whether you're an umpire, you're watching this, or you're potentially interested umpire, whether you're just someone in the health and fitness world, or you're a coach, because another piece that I want to really be able to utilize this is talk about some really interesting skills of like motivational interviewing, all that fun stuff. Rob's got his hand raised. That means we got fun stuff. Hit me, Rob.
And really to anyone legitimately just trying to follow their dream and passion.
Ooh. Yes, 100%. So you might have noticed Rob and I always hydrating, always getting our caffeine in as well. I got my coffee. I got my electrolytes. So we're going to kind of start at the beginning. We're just going to kind of take this journey where it goes, and throughout it, try and pause, unpack things, and just kind of see where it takes us with knowing a general guideline. And I say we start all the way at the beginning, Rob. We got to go back to 12-year-old Rob Calvert. I mean, yeah, we could go back further, but I say we go all the way back to 12-year-old Rob Calvert, getting initially introduced to umpiring. I think the most important piece we could start with is, how did you know umpiring was a passion of yours first and foremost? Let's start there.
Really didn't. I played Little League, and just so everybody knows, like Mike, you by 12 years old, you and I were best friends.
Oh yeah.
So you've been throughout this whole journey with me, but I didn't really know I had a passion or anything for umpiring. One day this kid came up to me in middle school. Forgive me, I can't remember his name. And he said, I just started umpiring at Otsego, which was our town league. And he showed me his indicator, and I thought that was pretty cool. And I was like, oh, I should try that. And that's how it started. And he gave me all the information, and I went to Otsego to sign up. So that's legitimately how I found out about umpiring and all of that. I don't think a lot of people know that part.
Yeah, I think that's a funny piece of the puzzle to see how influential umpiring has obviously been in your life, and to see where you were able to take it at such a young age. And even then you could say, and I don't know, like for me at least, it was a cool way to make some easy money. Like it was good money for like at 12 years old, for us to make cash or even just to make that kind of money was kind of awesome. So now let's look at, all right, so we got started at what point from 12 years old all the way on, even to about 18, there's this window of time, you're umpiring, you're now building clout, you're starting to build a passion for it. Where do you realize like, all right, I think I can take this to the next level, or at least want to try?
My very first baseball game when I was 12 years old. And like, I am positive there are other people who hopefully are listening to this who can relate to the first time they've ever done something, whether that's MMA, boxing, being a player of baseball, football, being an umpire. But I knew from that very first time on the ball field, in that very first game, that this is what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. I say it all the time. I could tell you every detail about that game. We got rained out in the middle of the second. My dad picked me up. He said, how did you like it? And I grew up, with, as you know, a ton of anxiety, and was very quiet and very timid and very non-confrontational. And everybody found it a little humorous that me, of all people, wanted to do this. And I said to my dad, he goes, how did you like it? I said, this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. And like around 15 years later, I joined with American Federation of Umpires. And that's when I started looking at professional umpire school. And then once I realized professional umpire school is a thing, and that's how you make it into professional baseball, minor league baseball, and eventually, hopefully, you build your way to MLB. I was like, that just opened up a whole new ball game, no pun intended.
So you touched on a really interesting point of the kind of influence and impact of the characteristics or certain personality traits that you had, right? Like maybe being a little bit timid, maybe not being as secure, confident in yourself, which if like, I also, for people that know Rob now that have met him like in the later years, it's also probably kind of funny to think about that. I like, again, going back, we've been best friends forever. So being able to see that, I've been able to see it too in the transformation, but I wanted to pause there to talk about that piece and highlight that for a second, to be able to recognize the change it's made for you. And when did you really start to recognize that and feel that influence, not just on the field, but where it would kind of bleed into the other aspects of your life, from school to socializing to like, other endeavors, to even the confidence in your body, into all these other pieces?
I never gave that too much thought until right now, and it came really quickly to me. It was when I joined American Federation of Umpires around 15. I think we were sophomores then. And you probably remember we sat next to each other in social studies, and instead of having my social studies binder, I'd have my umpire binder. And I would just be reading all about that stuff because it was probably Tuesday and I had class that night. It was just, they made me feel like one of the guys. They took me at such a young age. By then, I think they only had a handful, if that, of 20-year-olds there. So it was a really cool deal for me. But being in that brotherhood-like thing, that's when everything started to change for me personally. And I think that's when I really became a lot more social, because I remember once I hit 12th grade, you couldn't shut me up.
Yeah, that's definitely one way to put it. But dude, like, that's the other thing. If you ask anyone, at least from my perspective, anyone that we kind of like hung out with or interacted with you, like, you brought this energy to the room, to the party, to the classroom, to wherever we were at. Like, this is what I would always explain to people when I was like, we were single, even like it would be a 1-2 combo. Rob could open the door like no one else could to a conversation, to like, I can socialize with people, but I was very timid as far as like the initial like starting point. Rob, you had no problem doing that. I think it's awesome to be able to even unpack that a little bit, because it's not just about, okay, cool, I found this passion, it can change these things, but it's recognizing, hey, if you're in a spot right now where you're introverted or you're, feel intimidated by the situations, that doesn't have to be what it's going to look like for the rest of your life and be the end all of it. So I'm curious to you, Rob, like, if you could speak to the people that are relating to 12-year-old Rob, 10-year-old Rob, 8-year-old Rob, what would you tell them, or what would you even tell yourself at that point, knowing what you know now?
Show up.
Ooh,
and keep
okay.
showing up. Just don't stop.
What if I'm
I don't
scared?
know. There were
What if
times
I'm intimidated?
I was, and I was definitely scared. I if you really love something, I feel like your passion really overcomes that fear. That fear becomes butterflies. Those butterflies become exciting butterflies. And that's always how I felt. Fun fact, before every game to this day, I always have to pee, even though I didn't drink anything before the game. It's really fun random fact everybody should know. But it's going to be intimidating. When I went to AFU, that young, it was intimidating. I started teaching at 16 years old, teaching grown men who were in their 40s. That was out of this world odd for me. But I was taken seriously because I was respected at what I did. I can't even get into those feelings. And then, going to umpire school thinking, well, I've been doing this long, and, I'm kind of, one of those top umpires in where I am now. I got this, only to realize there's 150 other guys who are just as good, if not a hell of a lot better than you, who've been doing it just as long, if not longer. So to those who feel intimidated, just grab the bull by the horns, take the ride, and don't get off until you stop having fun.
Oh, so there's like 2 points there that you really, I held up 4 fingers, but you guys know what I'm talking about here, right? Like, you get it. 2 points there. Like, A, make sure you're enjoying it and having a fun in the process. And maybe not every second of it's going to be fun. Maybe there's stress moments and all that, but also the idea of a big fish in a small pond. Not that really was like New York's a big pond or a big place.
No, but that's a perfect example.
So you, especially now at 18, 19, 20, after high school, this transitionary period, let's even say from 18 to like 22, of going that into school with Wendelstadt's School of Umpire. Am I going to say
it's Harry Wendelstadt's School for Umpires. Yep.
So you go from, all right, I'm this big fish in a potentially smaller pond comparatively. Now everyone's like the top of their class. And I think a lot of people can relate to that for either our athletes or our fitness enthusiasts or anyone out there. Like when you're going from high school ball to college ball, from college ball to the pros, or whatever capacity, or for our fighters, you're going to like the small circuit to a regional to then a bigger promotion and bigger into the UFC or whatever the big organizations are in your specific skill set. When you did that, what were some of the skills that you kind of built prior that you realized came in handy, or some of the things you're like, oh shit, I have to now build this new skill I don't have yet? What were some things that you either had that were helpful or you needed to develop to help you there?
The things that I had that were helpful were the very basics. I had the basics, and now I had an opportunity to finely tune those basics. Besides that, it was, oh shit, I need to learn how to adapt to this situation. because that was the first, and also that was my first time away from home. I went to college back home. I still live off the same avenue I was born off of 33 years later. So traveling like that was wild to me. I was very, very nervous to be on my own, on top of having to deal with other guys to go up against, now coming in at a disadvantage, looking intimidated from day one. It's a hole that you just, whew. It's funny now that we talk about it. It's like, wow, that was really a lot, but I loved it. I love to umpire. I umpire because I have fun doing it. I don't do it. My last professional game was over 10 years ago, but I'm having the most fun in my career 21 years in now. But back then at school, yeah, it was, you wanted to be the best. You wanted to make a name for yourself. I say now umpiring is fun and I am having fun. But if I get back into that mindset when I was 18, it was, you're coming to show major league umpires that you know how to do this job better than anyone else, and that you are born to umpire professional baseball. That was the mindset. You paired yourself up with the good guys, and you were a good person. All you had to do, I helped other umpires. Other umpires helped me. Those are the umpires that make it. The people who are helping each other aren't cutthroat. But it was a lot of adapting, a lot, and in a 5-week amount of time.
So just to unpack some things there that you talked about, coming in with certain skills of, right, like you had the basics, you had your fundamentals strong, which took time to build, right? It took a lot of work ethic. Like you said, even being in school and being in class and knowing what your priority was, which I think is an important thing to know. Like, college doesn't have to be something like, this is the only option I have. You can go to other skills, other trades, other opportunities, and being able to take advantage of them while you're young, and you can do it and physically do it. And there's this piece of it of like, also not just having the basics, but having a growth mindset. This is something I want to highlight, that, there's this idea of fixed mindset and growth mindset. Like, fixed mindset, like, I can't do it. You tell yourself this story of like, it is what it is. There's nothing I can do to change it. You could go into umpiring and be like, well, I have my basic skills. This isn't good enough, and I don't make it, then that's it. And there's nothing I can do about it. Versus what I can highlight that I'm even hearing is the growth mindset of, I know I can grow. I can ask questions. You were never afraid to ask questions from what I saw. And even if something didn't work out, you weren't like, oh, well, hands up, I'm done. And I'm kind of curious, because then there's also another piece of like the physical fitness side of things that I think people might be surprised that came into play, at least for you, that I saw was important. But before we even dig into that, I want to talk about this idea, if you're cool with touching on the idea of being able to face adversity and being able to work past that from the school side of it, from the Wendelstadt school side, and explain to people a little bit how it works. When you go to school, what's the process like? And then what happens afterwards? How can you get placed in the minors, MLB? Like, what does that process look like a little bit?
I'm going to speak on the process it was when I went to school back in 06 and 08. It might have changed now, and now, with COVID, I'm sure different amounts of people go. But I remember back in 06, it was an average of like 150 people in my class. Basically, if you want to be a professional umpire, there are two schools. At the time, there was Jim Evans, which is no longer there. Now there is a Professional Baseball Umpire Corporation. And there was and still is Harry Wendelstadt Schools for Umpires. That's where I went. You go to one of those schools. They start pretty much the first day is like January 2nd. You get right into it. It's a 5-week course for both schools. And when I went, like I said, an average of about 150 went, let's say. So you got a total of 300 guys in two schools. They would take the 25 best of you from each class. Then if you got picked, you just paid all this money for school and all that. So if you didn't get picked, they either will send you to a independent league if they see some potential. Primarily they've done it with a lot of younger umpires. I know, older umpires have gotten up there too. Or you just go home and it's like, thanks for coming. If you get picked, you go with the other 25 from PBUC to actually the Professional Baseball Umpire Corporation. They are minor league baseball umpires, assigners, boss, what have you. But let's assume it was Jim Evans back in the day for political reasons, whatever. You would all go to PBUC, the 50 of you, and that's a 2.5-week evaluation course, about 3 weeks. where you just get watched umpiring baseball by AAA guys who went back and forth between Major League Baseball, minor league baseball, some major league guys. You just work baseball every day, and you get watched by professional umpires, and they evaluate you, and depending on how many jobs are open that season, that's how many they'll give. So I remember my year, let's say, I think there was like 21 jobs open. I could be wrong. I was either 22 or 23rd because I was told at the time to have my phone available next to me at all times, because in professional baseball then, there was constant movement. Somebody either would leave, or maybe somebody, got fired or got hurt or has a concussion, etc. So my future umpire in chief at the time had known me since 15, because he knows the umpire in chief of the AFU. So he said, I have known Rob. He said this in front of the rest of the board. I have known Rob for a while, so I did not evaluate him. But Rob, I will say this. In the next 4 days when you get home, go home, get your ass off the couch, stop eating potato chips, go for a run, and lose some weight. And it was verbatim. I'll never forget that. And that year I lost like 35 pounds and got shredded. And that's how you become a minor league umpire. And from there, you just work your way in the minors, and you get evaluated a few times a year. And let's say there are 20 umpires in your league. Everybody wants to be number one. Otherwise, why are you there?
Boom. So there's again, a lot to unpack there. The kind of few things that I wanted to touch on is first, just look at the math and the numbers really quick, because I'm a numbers person. So that means out of 300 of the total between both schools, you said about 50 people are going to get picked to go to the eval piece. So that's less than 20% of the total class. So you got to be in the top 20% of your class just to get an opportunity, just to go to the next piece of it. So that in and of itself, 80% of the people are getting dropped off right away. Now, once you get there, you have 50 people are there, maybe depending on the season, depending on the year, got 20, 25 spots. So that's 50%. Once you've already gotten to that, you're in the top 20%. Now, so like 10% of the total class gets picked to move on to that piece. So that's just kind of a crazy, to me, kind of data point that I wanted to highlight. That's really cool that I think speaks to you, but also is just interesting to say like, hey, just because the odds are against you with whatever you're doing doesn't mean it's not possible. I wanted to highlight that. The other piece you mentioned now, because we have our audience is very much into health and fitness. Obviously, that's what we do. I want to touch on the fitness piece of it, because talk about why does that even matter? Like, I think it's kind of common sense for our health, why losing weight and all that stuff matters, but why as an umpire would it matter if you drop 30 pounds? And what did you notice for you specifically?
When I was in pro ball, you do what you're told because you want to make it. So you told me to lose weight, I'm going to lose weight. But performance-wise, it really was great. My rookie year, we were in the Gulf Coast League in Florida. In that league, you umpire every day at 12 noon in June, July, and August in Florida at 12 noon every day. So it was nicknamed the Gulf Roast League. And between sweating off 5 pounds every day, I would just go for a 2-mile run after the game. And back then at 18, that's all I had to do, and it was the best time of my life, and I miss it so much. But really, I mean, behind the plate, we'll wear about 10 pounds of equipment between our shoes, our gear, and we're not sitting behind the plate when you only have one other umpire out there. You're running up the field. If there's a ground ball to the shortstop with nobody on, you go all the way up. You go all the way to the 90-foot line. Not the 90-foot line where the box is. You go up halfway the line. And you really got to bust your ass. And a lot of people don't see that because the stereotype is, well, I see umpires on Major League Baseball all the time, and they're old and they're heavier, and I'm not going to disrespect any veteran. But they paid their dues. They also work with more umpires. And at that point, I was never one to question anyone who was in a higher position than I was as an umpire. But yeah, definitely performance-wise, you get to your spots quicker. You just feel better. Really, I mean, all around, obviously, being in good shape is awesome. I have gone back and forth This is my third time going back and forth in the last 15 years between 40 to 60 pounds, gaining and losing. And it's like I've been physically like 4 different people in the last 15 years. I've always had a different look. That has nothing to do more with baseball, but baseball also gives me a reason to train. You know, I mean, I just recently started getting back into training because, well, I'm on the field now. I want to be fast. I want to be faster than these 18-year-old kids. Still am. Thank you very much. Yep. But it gives me a reason to train. It gives me a reason to stretch. It gives me a reason to want to be better physically and athletically. You know, I don't consider myself an athlete as an umpire, but I'm moving around and I'm getting older. I'm not the 21-year-old umpire I used to be, you know.
So again, a lot to unpack there. And the other piece, it speaks back to this point I made earlier with that growth mindset and the ability to say, hey, you told me to do this. I'm going to go do that. Like whether it's you, and you hear this from what I can see in anyone when you're out there, when you watch these, you know, people talk, the most successful people in their field or the people that end up making something and making progress. And this is where I want to pull this out to understand that growth mindset to say, hey, if I have to go do this, I'm going to do that and I'm going to make it happen. And then be able to see the rewards that will come from that, not only on the field, in the gym, wherever it's being applied, but how it kind of corresponds into the rest of your life, quality of life, confidence, how you feel, your ability. Because also when you have those games at noon every day, the ability to not just perform, but hydrate, fuel, recover, and do it again the next day is a really important piece that it sounds like you were able to do. Obviously because you were taking care of yourself, but also your ability to stay focused and dialed in. So that's a really kind of powerful piece that I wanted to highlight from that for the fitness and the health side of things, but now bringing it back to the journey, bringing it back.
You hear all those background noise? I'm sorry. That's my cat. Go on.
Yeah, Bali. Yeah, Bali. Shout out to Bali. So also, if you guys are watching on YouTube or you're watching on social media, if you got a cat, let me know in the comments. I'm curious to hear this. Let us know if you got a pet or something in the comments. I want to know about this. If you can relate, you guys get it. Especially if we see Bali like hop up on your head mid-shot. I
made sure you would only be able to see her tail. She's gone crazy right now. She's so hyper.
That's awesome. So basically being able to look at not only the impact like in the performance side of it, but how it kind of impacts the rest of your life. So I want to now take this transition. We're going to kind of pause. We're almost going to break the chronological order a little bit because I think it's important. We've talked about like what's gone well, you know, the work ethic, all that fun stuff when things are going your way, and not even like maybe everything was going your way because it took a lot of work and whatnot. But like you mentioned in 06 and in 08, talk about the difference between the two, because you came back in 08 and you, I forgot, I'm going to butcher the name of the word. I want to call it the Golden Mask Award. I don't know.
It was 06 when the Golden Mask Award. Yep.
So I want to talk about what that takes, because there's not always like, hey, things are going to be perfect. Things are going to work out exactly how you want, and how you are able to, again, deal with that when things aren't going your way, and what it feels like on the negative side, because not always going to be rainbows and smiles, right?
Yeah. So my first year at umpire school, I was 18, and I was 1 out of 6 guys to get a Golden Mask Award, which is such an honor, really. But at the same time, what that means, say the word for me, Mike. Can't say it right now. Subliminally.
Subconsciously?
No, what that subliminally
subliminal
means. There you go. You don't have to edit that part. But what that kind of means is you were in, you know, anywhere from 31 to 26. You know, you didn't make the top 25, but you did something that deserves recognition. Okay. So when I got that award, I knew, and I was still very honored to get it. I had all the major league umpires sign it. I think the only time I've ever seen my dad maybe emotional. I don't even know if I called him. But when I got that, you know, the next day was evaluation day. And I believe it was Eddie Hickox who had my first year evaluation, who was like a father figure to me. If he ever saw this, Eddie, I love you. Very nice to meet you and have you in my life then. But he told me, like, listen, you know, we thought you did a great job. This was a big experience for you, because the big thing was it was my first time away from home. And what they said when they introduced me to the award, before they ever said my name, was the next recipient, we had literal cash bets on when he was going to go home. They go, we were positive he was going to go home. We were just waiting till when. And we had money on it. And they go, and then 2 weeks later, he's screaming at everybody, telling them to put the bats inside the dugout and get all the shit off the field. And I kind of got a gist that they might have been talking about me. You know, it was bittersweet because that year I did get sent to an independent league, and it was in Minnesota, Canada, and Wisconsin in the Northwoods League. So I knew my journey wasn't over yet. I wasn't there. I didn't accomplish what I want, but I knew it wasn't over because my evaluator told me, we want you to come back. We want you to go to this league and experience life on the road and see how you like this game professionally, and being on the road like that. And we want you to come back the next year. So at umpire school, the unspoken rule is, you know, you only get 2 tries. You can go back a 3rd time, but it's not worth it. You get 2 tries. If you go back your 2nd year, you're not considered a first week student. That's not your 1st week. That's your 6th week of umpire school, they say. So if you go back as a 2-year guy, the bar that was here your 1st year is now up here. My 2nd year, 10 2-year guys went. Okay. And we had another big class. I think it was a little smaller than the first one. We'll say like around 100 guys to be fair. Okay. The 10 2-year guys, there were a lot of them that were cutthroat guys. They didn't want to see you make it. They didn't care. There was very, very few that helped each other. There were some of us, and 2 of us made it, and I was one of them. And in my evaluation, Ed Hickox gave me that eval again. And he goes, Rob, listen, you know, we asked you to go to the Northwoods League and umpire, see how you liked it. You know, I actually took 1 year off in between seasons, so I didn't go back at 19. I went back at 20 years old. He goes, and then you had an extra season, and we really expected a lot from you, and you just didn't deliver. And I was like, oh, no. I was, in that moment, crushed. And he goes, but we're still sending you to Cocoa Beach anyway for the tryout. And I was like, oh, my God. I was like, dude, they would do that to everybody. It was something they would screw around with us. But I remember Paul Nart, God bless him, and I've told you this story, and it's a story I want to say because this is a failure story. It was my 2nd year before evaluation, and there was a fly ball to the pitcher, and I was working the bases. Excuse me.
Clear that throat.
Yes. I was working the bases. All I had to do was take 1 or 2 footsteps back, like a normal human being would. Okay? Well, me being me, excuse me, me being me, I went back and forth, and I looked like a ballerina. That's what it looked like. And Paul Nart was our our lead instructor. And he came out on the field in front of my entire class. There were 2 umpires on the field, or if that. And he came out and he said, Rob, as your instructor. So if an instructor ever came on the field, you assumed they were playing the role of a manager to argue you. But when they say as your instructor, that means, no, we're being serious. He was screaming at me, top of his lungs, screaming at me. As your instructor, stop thinking an umpire. He goes, this is your 2nd year. I don't know what you're doing. Stop thinking. He goes, umpire the baseball game. I'm sure there was more said. I'm trying to be nice about it. And damn, when I got off the field, like it took everything I had not to cry in front of another 100 men right in front of me because that broke me. And I remember we got to the hotel that night where we stayed. And the guy who was staying with me, I was like, can you do me a favor? I was like, can you leave for 15 minutes? And he was like, yep, he saw what happened. So he gave me some time. And I just grabbed a bunch of pillows and screamed into them, let it all out. And I remember when I got picked and the top 25 guys were in the back, and we were with all the instructors, and they'd all come and shake our hand and congratulate us. Paul was one of those guys.
Uh-oh, something happened to the audio, Rob. So Paul was one of those guys, and then it just kind of got a little – there it is.
There, we just froze. I'm sorry. So what was the last thing?
So Paul was one of those guys, and then it got cut. So you went back to the room, you were screaming, you let it all out, and then –
okay. So then, we were in the room with all the top 25 guys, and all the instructors came in to congratulate us, and Paul was obviously one of those guys. And Paul came up to me, and he shook my hand, and he said, "Congratulations, Rob." I said, "Paul," I go, "I thought you hated me." And he just gave me a smile and a wink, and I was like, "All right." And I was like, "That was, it was a moment." But failure like that and being embarrassed like that in front of a whole class is horrible. And like, people saw it in my face that I was about to break down, because I just got my ass ripped apart in front of the whole, as a 2-year student who was trying to get a spot. And it was embarrassing. It was really embarrassing. It's a moment I'll definitely never forget. But what a lesson it taught me too, like, people call me and people keep calling, the thing goes out. And I'll just never forget that and the lessons it taught me. But 0 out of 10 would recommend.
It's definitely not an enjoyable experience, obviously. But those are the moments that, again, I think a lot of times, I get torn between those kind of moments, because sometimes people argue that can make you a better person. To me, sometimes it just reveals who you always were.
It
and
makes or breaks you.
Yeah, like it reveals that character. And going back to 10-year-old Rob, right? Imagine that happens with that. Obviously, we grow every year, but that, intrinsic or that internal person that's insecure, and that doesn't mean we're not insecure as we age or those things, but the ability to face that and battle that and work through that, I think, like you said, even though it's a moment where it didn't work out perfect, the ability to work past that is a really important piece. So we're going to just kind of pause here, because we're going to have that be basically part one, and then we're going to dig into now, what does that do for the rest of the journey, and then we'll dig into, like, there's a lot more to come on that, but we're going to kind of just pause it on that piece, because that's a beautiful story, I think, to embody a lot of what we're talking about in this first part of it, with the growth mindset, with being able to stay determined, with being able to continuously show up, like you mentioned before, and all the pieces that kind of get cut up in between.
And for any umpires who know me, who actually watch this whole thing with me, this is Mike and I have known each other for well over almost 3 decades.
Yeah. 23 years or 20?
Yeah, a long time.
Wait, how old are we? How old are we, dude? 33? So, right. So, yeah. So
34. Yeah.
So, yeah, 25 years, man.
So this is just something that we thought was a great platform for Mike and Life of the Fighter, and really for me to finally get this story about umpiring out, and why it's such a huge reason of why I associate myself so closely with it, so now you guys know, if you didn't.
If you don't know, now you know.
Now you know.
Bam!